Well, hello and welcome back, and thanks as always for tuning in. As I know all of you have much better things to do with your life, at least I hope so. But welcome to episode 7, and this is titled To Do Lists, Boston Accents, My Career Change, and Deeply in Love. I'm one of those people who needs to have a to do list as I like to get things done and to be on top of things. But there was one list I never forgot from decades ago, and these three items are on the list: a white shirt, a chainsaw, and a sympathy card. Now, talk about a suspicious to do list. Highly unusual combination and also quite questionable. But here's my reason for each. I was running low on white shirts back in the day when people wore suits and ties. I needed to borrow my brother's chainsaw since I wanted to chop up a tree that had fallen on our property after a storm. And don't get me wrong, I'm no fan of chainsaws, and I only used it for some smaller branches and limbs. The bulk of the tree is still just beyond our property after 10 years or so, and the sympathy card was for a friend whose mother had passed away. And since I'm a Connecticut guy, originally from New Haven, Connecticut, we're very accustomed to the Massachusetts, or you could say Boston and Rhode Island accent. And to make this easier, I will call it the Boston accent from here on in. We find this accent really annoying. Basically, it comes down to this. The letter R in Boston sounds like the word ah, like when your doctor tells you to open your mouth to say ah. The letter R is not supposed to be pronounced this way. And the word lobster is not supposed to be pronounced lobster. And dollar is not meant to sound like dollar. You sound like Elmer Fudd. But to all you Massachusetts and Rhode Island folks, we still love you. We're New Englanders after all. And speaking of the Boston accent, I think that there are quite a few opportunities for speech therapists in the Boston area. It's going to take years of hard work on their part to get them to pronounce the letter R's correctly. And there are 1.1 million people in Rhode Island, 6.9 million in Mass, and 1.4 million in New Hampshire. And those are the three states that predominantly don't pronounce their R's, and that population adds up to 9.4 million people that would need speech therapy. So there's an opportunity there. When I was working on my career change back in the 1980s, I was putting my resume and cover letter together, and I had a close friend and my wife, girlfriend at the time, helping me with each one. Both had more experience in the business world than I had, which was easy since I had no experience in the business world. So I was telling one of my coworkers about my pursuit, and he asked, "If Steve is working on your resume and Mary is working on your cover letter, what are you doing?" And I replied, "I'm doing what all effective executives are doing. I'm organizing and delegating the small stuff, and I show up to the interview." I really believe that people that are deeply in love, and I mean really deeply in love, rarely get married. And if they do, it most likely won't last. This form of intense attachment usually spells doom. And I'd be interested in any studies that were done on this. The chances are not very good on finding information on this narrow criteria. I'm sure it would be quite difficult. They would have to be younger, less mature, and crazily in love. But love does have a way of finding its way. And that intense and passionate type of love does have a tendency to dwindle and self-regulate. But as I like to say, the Romeos and Juliets can run into some dreadful disputes, especially in today's world. People that are intensely, deeply in love have to walk on eggshells all the time. Every little thing is scrutinized, and they can't help but become oversensitized to all matters and circumstances. But hats off to those who did survive this intense passion over the decades. And oh yeah, my wife can't stand me, and sometimes I can't even stand myself. But we've been married for 31 years and together for 37 years. In order to survive it, this can require the detached technical skills of an assassin. Our local church had a pledge drive years ago for a major building renovation, and the estimate was for $3.5 million for the construction. They called us up and asked us if we had any questions about the pledge since they had noticed that we didn't offer a pledge. And I told them, no, we don't have any questions. We're not making a pledge for $3.5 million renovation. Do you have any questions? But they're a good church. You know the age-old saying, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger? I don't buy that. I have my own version of that statement. What doesn't kill you now is most likely slowly eating away at you and causing all sorts of disorders that will catch up to you. What doesn't kill you now is slowly breaking you down. That's a real uplifter, isn't it? My son was diagnosed with the likelihood that he has ADD, attention deficit disorder, or what I call it, attention deficit whatever. So now my wife and I are resigned to the fact that we have to spend the rest of our lives trying to prove that he didn't inherit it from one of us. But it was most likely me, of course. After a major snowstorm one weekend, I asked a fellow employee who had a very good sense of humor how many inches she got over the weekend. She said about 8 or 9 inches of snow, and I replied, I wasn't asking about snow. Back in 2004, on the same subject, I had my first colonoscopy, and when it was over, and this is a true story, the doctor said that everything was perfect and I didn't have to come back for 10 years. And I told her I always thought I was a perfect asshole. Even she laughed too. That was one that got over pretty well. I hate speed bumps so much that I would legislate the removal of every single one of them in the country. They're stupid and they're ineffective. You don't hear much about identity theft anymore, but I always felt that if someone stole my identity, they would give it back to me very quickly, since once they noticed who I am and what I've done and not done, they would return my identity to me pronto. Nobody wants to be me. A woman broke up with me, rightfully so, years ago and told me that she didn't hear violins, and I wish I thought of this reply at the time, and I should have said, possibly because I don't play the violin. And I met my dear wife on Labor Day weekend in 1984, and how apropos, it's been a labor ever since. Bada-boom. Hope she's tuning in too. From here, I'm going to go through some of my quick one-liners that I enjoy. There are about 50 of them or so, and instead of me reading from paragraphs and then jumping into a quick one-liner that would make everything feel choppier and unrelated, then we'll revisit the longer soliloquies when we've completed these. Life throws you a lot of curveballs, and I'm not a very good catcher. I do enjoy the quote, be curious, be brave, be kind, and be humble. That's one of the best. Contentment, what the hell is that? If you're content, don't worry, it won't last long. There are only molecules in sociology. Don't remember where I read that. Life is curved. There are very few straight lines, and those that are short. No pressure here, folks, but the clock never stops. I see myself as being 300 miles wide and an inch deep. And I will end up with this one. You don't have to be on the road to be on the road. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you shortly.